Hey bees, I'm Marie from Humblebee and Me, and today we are making some Winter Wonderland bath bombs. So these beauties pair wonderfully with the 3 other Winter Wonderland themed recipes I've released this season. There's a soap, there's some lip gloss, and there's also some body lotion. So you pack those 4 things together and you've got yourself a fantastic holiday gift set. So bath bombs are basically a dry version of that baking soda and vinegar volcano that we all made as kids in science class. So the baking soda part stays the same, and that's our base. And so now we need something acidic to react it with. So we're going to use citric acid. So citric acid is a dry, white, sort of granular powder. It looks a lot like sugar, but it tastes pretty much the opposite of sugar. If you've ever had a sour gummy candy that has that sort of powdery, crystalline coating on it, that's usually a blend of citric acid and sugar, which gives you that awesome sweet and sour balance. So what we'll need to do is combine the baking soda and the citric acid, so we have our base and our acid together. And then we need to bind them together so that we don't just have sort of fizzing bath salts, but we actually have a solid lump of something. So we'll be adding some other goodies to the mixture. We'll add some Epsom salts to help soften our skin, and also they give a really great sparkle to the finished bath bombs. And then some colorants, some glitter, some essential oils, and some oil to help just continue to soften our skin and make for an excellent spa-y bath experience. So once you have that all stirred together, you'll have a dryish powder that's still not going to hold together. So that's where our last ingredient comes in, which is witch hazel. And so I do recommend using witch hazel rather than water because it works better. The bath bombs dry faster and you get less of a fizzy reaction than you would with water. If you don't have witch hazel, you can use water, but if you do have witch hazel, definitely give that a go instead. And if you really like making bath bombs, it's definitely worth buying some because it's really cheap. So we're going to have some of that in a mister bottle. And what we want to do is we want to get the powdery, soon to be fizzy mixture just damp enough that the crystals in it start to dissolve, so we can start to pack them together, and then as they dry out, they'll fuse together like a sugar cube, right? So that's the happy medium point we're going for, and that's kind of the tricky part of making bath bombs. If you had too much liquid, they will in the mold or as they're drying, and you'll come back and you'll find sort of sad, bloated bath bombs. And you can still use them, but they're just not as pretty as they would have been, and they don't fizz as enthusiastically because they've already fizzed half of their reaction off just sitting on your table, which is sad. And then if you don't add enough moisture, you'll give them up, and they'll just like a dry sandcastle. So you definitely want to hit that happy medium, and we will go over that in the video, and you'll be able to sort of see how I get there and figure out more or less kind of what we're looking for. But yeah, so let's go make some bath bombs. So before we dive in, let's take a look at the equipment I've got here. So this is a nice wide, large bowl, and that's important. You want the bowl to be quite wide and reasonably shallow because we want to be able to create a lot of surface area with the bath bomb mixture when we're trying to hydrate it, just enough to hold it together. You'll see what I mean later on. I have tried this with deep bowls and it is a big pain, so I highly recommend going with a nice shallow one. And this here is my trusty Value Village mini food processor, which I use almost exclusively for making bath bombs with because it's so tiny that it's not great for food, but it's perfect for sort of DIY projects. If you only have a coffee grinder, that can work, but it's not great because coffee grinders are a lot smaller than this. So if you don't have sort of a mini food processor, just use a full-sized one or your blender. And then I have a section of measuring cups, measuring spoons, spoon for stirring, spatula, and yeah, so let us dive in. So to start with, I'm going to blend up part of our baking soda in here with our wet ingredients and some of our dye. So we're going to need a full cup of baking soda. So I'm going to start by putting half a cup in here, and we'll sort of see how it goes. We're doing something like what you would do when you're making biscuits, where you're cutting a lot of the fats into the powder ahead of time for a nice sort of dough, and that will help us not trigger the bath bomb reaction before we want to, which is of course when it goes into our bath. So I'm going to add some of our colorant here. So I'm using indigo powder, and we're going to put in 1/32 of a teaspoon, which seems like absolutely nothing, but really will make these bath bombs a lovely color. And then we're going to put in a teaspoon of glitter. You can put in more glitter if you want, but A teaspoon I find sort of gave them a nice shimmer, but also didn't make my bathtub too much of a disaster. But if you are a glitter fiend and you don't mind cleaning out your tub, knock yourself out. And then for our liquids, we're going to add some oils and some essential oils. So for our liquid oils, I'm going to do a blend of olivem 300 and safflower oil. So the nice thing about olivem 300 is that it's an emulsifier. So it is a sort of a modified oil, so it is water soluble. So you could use turkey red oil instead if that is what you have. But I'm enjoying playing with this new ingredient these days. And so this olivem 300 will help the safflower oil distribute in your bath water so that you don't end up with any oil streaks, which can be a little bit hazardous when you try to get out of your tub. And now we're going to add our essential oils. So I have a blend here of benzoin, fir, and pine, which will smell like vanilla and a lovely forest. So we're going to do about 2 blobs of benzoin, 16 drops of fir, and 10 drops of pine. I'm going to add a bit more baking soda here. So we're now at 3/4 cup. And get this to 1 cup here. Good enough. And we're going to blend this up and stop to stir and scrape as necessary. So you can see that this blend is quite uniform, so we are done blending. And you can also see that it's quite a bit softer than dry baking soda because of all the oils that we've added. We are ready to tip this into our bowl and then add the rest of our ingredients. So just disengage that there. It's got a little locking mechanism. And we are done with this little thing now, so we can put that aside. All right, this is stir. And we're going to add the rest of our powdered ingredients. So that is 3/4 cup of citric acid and 3/4 cup of Epsom salts. So the citric acid is what makes these bath bombs fizz, of course. So this is the acidic part, and then baking soda is basic. And so when you get them wet, they fizz. There's definitely some clumps in there we are going to need to smash up a bit. And then Epsom salts can help relax dry muscles. And I got this massive jug at Costco. And part of the reason I don't like sending the Epsom salts through the grinder is because they have this lovely sparkly quality to them that looks awesome in bath bombs, and especially these ones. I dare say I don't think I will run out of Epsom salts anytime soon. Ooh. All right, time to stir this up. Use the back of your spoon to break up any clumps. So if you wanted to, you can send the citric acid through your grinder, but I really hate doing that because generally when you pop the lid off, you end up with a bunch of airborne citric acid, which you sort of inevitably end up inhaling or getting in your nose, and it's of course very acidic. And so as soon as it sort of makes contact with any of your mucous membranes, it's really, really, really unpleasant. It's really sort of, yeah, imagine sort of Warheads or Sour Patch Kids, but much, much, much more intense and without the satisfaction of the candy part of it. So I much prefer the spoon smushing method, even if it isn't as efficient. All right, that looks quite even. So what I'm going to do now is spread this out over a nice wide area, and we're gonna start misting it with some witch hazel. So I recommend using witch hazel rather than water because the bath bombs dry faster when you use witch hazel, and they react less than they do when you add water. So I've got a little mister here with a bit of witch hazel at the bottom. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna mist and stir. You want to have the liquid distributed as much through the mixture as quickly as possible so that it doesn't react too much. It will react a little, you will hear a little fizzing as you do this, but we want to keep that to an absolute minimum. So now we can do our first check to see how this is holding together. Take a handful, squeeze it. Okay, so a little bit of structural integrity, but not a lot. I think we'll need a little bit more moisture, but you need surprisingly little. And if you add too much, they will react in the mold or as they're drying out. And that is obviously not what we want because we want them to react in our bath. Okay, very nearly there. Okay, that's good. So I'm just giving this a light tap, and they're not immediately shattering at least. But when we give them a really firm squeeze, you know, they hold their shape enough that you figure you could tap them out of a mold without them falling apart. I might give them one extra spritz. Hopefully I don't live to regret this. I find that I tend to err on the side of it feels like sometimes a little bit too much liquid, and it's a tricky balance to find. So if it's pretty dry where I live, so it tends to be a little bit more forgiving than if it were humid. But, okay. I'm gonna stop there. We'll do a test one, see how that works. So I'm just using a 1/4 cup mold, and you start pressing powder in. You can buy, of course, dedicated bath bomb molds, but I don't make a lot of bath bombs, so I am perfectly happy with just using a measuring cup. You really want to absolutely just cram that in there. And let's tap that out and see how that does. I've got a sheet of parchment paper here. All right, it seems to be holding its own. Let us continue. If we'd added too much moisture, by now you'd be able to see these ones starting to swell a bit. So it's looking pretty good. I'm gonna turn these leftovers into a teensy bath bomb that we'll just do a quick test of so you can see it fizz away. I've got a little measuring spoon here. I think that one's entirely too small. Let's upgrade to a full teaspoon. Perhaps tiny bath bombs are not the greatest of ideas. There's just not enough, I can't get enough leverage on this to press it. But what we can do is just add a little bit of water to this mixture and you'll see it fizz away. All right, got a bit of water here and let's get some fizzing on. And there you go, you just made some Winter Wonderland bath bombs. All that's left to do is leave these for about 24 hours to dry out and fully solidify, and they are ready to use or to gift. Thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe and check the description box below for the full written recipe and the link to the recipe on my blog, which includes links to all the ingredients and all of the equipment I used. See you next time!